how you started on your journey of giving back.
I was at a stage in my career where I'd already enjoyed and worked hard for many successes. I didn't need to think about profit or income. I was fortunate. I was thinking about what could I do more in giving back. It was a time in my life where I wanted to do something a bit different with really measurable impact. There were bands of poor kids begging. There was nothing threatening about it. And they approached me begging for milk, not for money. And that was a touch point for me. It didn't keep me up at nights, but it stuck with me and came back to me repeatedly.
Neal, welcome to Thriving in the Age of Disruption podcast series. And we are in season 5 now. I usually start off by asking our guests to introduce themselves. Can you share?
I'm an American. I was born in Manhattan, in New York City, and I grew up in Manhattan. It's been an important part of my life and who I am. I've lived for the last 15 years in Vietnam. I devoted a good chunk of my life to graduate studies and to getting my PhD, which have been very important to many of the things that I've done since then, and in how I look at things and what tools I have as a result of a rigorous, strong academic background. Since finishing my doctorate, I largely have done consulting. That's the main way that I have paid my rent. Initially, I started out with one of the international financial consulting services firms, and I worked my way up over half a dozen years to being a partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers as a consultant, primarily focused on hospitality, tourism, real estate, some entertainment, and a little bit of fashion. I think because of the entrepreneurial spirit, I had for decades my own first Los Angeles and then also New York City-based consulting firm, working in all the many industries that I just outlined. And because hospitality and hotels and restaurants so resonated with me, I also was an owner and operator of a number of restaurants. I ended up a devoted traveler in visiting Vietnam not long after it opened 20-something years ago. It's an overused word, but I fell in love with Vietnam. It was so exotic, different from anything I knew, the colors, the smells, the food, the energy. I had lived in Europe. I was an American. And 24 years ago, it was really exotic. And I loved it. I kept coming back as a visitor to Vietnam. I knew, of course, that being a visitor or a traveler was different than being a resident in good and challenging ways. I wondered, what would it be like to live here? I'm in Ho Chi Minh City now as we speak, my home. And I developed a few consulting projects through consulting, through professional personal networks. Typical of a lot of projects I did, banks often will end up owning multi-purpose hotel, residential, retail development that they have been oversold on very aggressive financials and plans, and when the properties don't work. And banks will hire consultants like myself and others to figure out what they should do. Should they sell them? Should they try to turn them around and manage them for a while? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I was able to do a big project like that in Vietnam. As with you, many of our clients wish to remain confidential for many good reasons, and I always respect that. And then one of the then well-noted 5-star resorts where I was staying, the owner and I got to know one another, and he was having some challenges. And so he also engaged me as a consultant. And I loved it. Of course, it was full of challenges. It certainly wasn't New York City or Los Angeles. And so then I decided, I was at a stage in my career where I'd already enjoyed and worked hard for many successes. And it was at a stage of my life that I didn't need to think about profit or income. I was fortunate. I was fortunate at a young age to learn the evils of greed. And to put it simply, I was thinking about what could I do more in giving back. And that's what led to the founding of Streets and my being here on a full-time basis for about 15 years, 16 years now. That's
So
my
that's a great journey. Firstly, I did an exchange program at NYU in 1991. A great time to be in New York City then.
it was yes.
And I lived in the East Village. There were about 50 of us from all over the world doing an international management program. And I was studying in Australia, Monash University, doing
Sure.
my MBA, and that was a great opportunity.
I was on the faculty at Stern as an adjunct professor for probably 2 decades. So you had that great experience there too.
Yes, it was really, truly memorable. It defined how I looked at life. I'm 60 now. So I was in my
Young.
20s then,
Yes.
and it was really wonderful being there. In this podcast, I'm really interested in interviewing different change makers like yourself who have two essential skill sets, and one is an entrepreneurial mindset, and another is a crisis ready mindset. We live in a world where these two mindsets are essential. So when I look at the entrepreneurial mindset, I say that you are someone who's resourceful, able to define a problem correctly. Number two, you're able to deal with uncertainty and take risks. And number three, to create value for yourself, for others, financial, non financial. So when you moved from doing well in school to becoming an educator, a consultant, and running your own business, obviously you've had to leverage on this mindset. What had you do these things?
I was fortunate that my um, graduate studies were very research based, strong on data and research, quantifiable and qualitative. And that's really super served me. The ability, the tools, the skills, the awareness to jump into data, to not be intimidated by data, and then to call upon different tools that enable you to sort through it to make some sense out of the data. And typically, what's the issue or what's the problem? Having worked in Vietnam with very poor kids, I'm reminded how lucky I was to grow up in a household with a mother and a father. We often will take that for granted, but we should not. My mother was a teacher, and my father was an attorney, and I learned a lot of good stuff from them. May they both rest in peace. Um, I don't know that I would say they were the best parents in the world, but I was lucky in that they were both good people and had very good moral compasses and made sure, as much as a parent can make sure of anything in their children. I have a 15-year-old daughter, and one of the things that I'm focusing on that she too has a good moral compass. She's surprised how little I care about her grades in school. Fortunately, she's a good student. There's a lot of seductive distractions out there, and it's important to have a way to look at all of that carefully and decide what things you should do and what you shouldn't do. My mother and father were travelers. I grew up in a comfortable family. They were committed every year to going abroad. And they visited Russia and China and Morocco way before anybody was going. And that was a great gift. When I was just finishing high school, I traveled with them. And that is opening me up to the world, has been key to my life.
Thank you for sharing that. You've called out a couple of things. One is from your educational background, the grounding in data analysis, quantifiable information, and that's been useful in consulting. But more importantly, what you've inherited from the exposure to traveling is that openness, curiosity, and being able to link maybe even unrelated things.
Yes.
So thank you for sharing that. We're doing a lot of work with family businesses, transition to the next gen and professionalizing, but also what they can do for society with philanthropy and impact. So I'm curious how you started on your journey of giving back and how you set up Streets International. What was that tipping point that had you think that I've had a good life, let me pay it forward? And how did you even think about the disadvantaged youth in Southeast Asia as a target audience?
I don't want to overdo the family part, but what shapes us in many ways. And I knew from my family that we have a responsibility for others, and that if there's a kid getting beat up, you need to step in and stop it. As forward charging as we may be as business leaders, as entrepreneurs, um, we have to also nourish the empathic, caring for others, in however you may define the others. So that one of my very first nights that I visited Ho Chi Minh City, the first time I was walking down Win Hui, one of the main streets in District 1, which then was not developed as it is. It was the inner gut of Ho Chi Minh City. And there were bands of poor kids begging. And there was one small group of 8 and 10-year-old kids. There was nothing threatening about it. And they approached me begging for milk, not for money. And that was a touch point for me. I grew up in New York City. There's poverty and there are people begging, but that just really touched me in their begging for milk.
Right.
There was one particular girl in that group that touched me, and her image stuck with me and challenged me. It's not a Hollywood movie. It didn't keep me up at nights, but it stuck with me and came back to me repeatedly. There were a number of so-called street kid restaurants all over the world, but particularly in Southeast Asia, Cambodia, and Laos, and Vietnam, and Thailand, taking some kids off the street and helping to clean them up and give them a place to sleep and a little bit of employment. And I tended to go and have a meal and make a small donation. And I've always come away with the same impression that their initiative started good, really big-hearted people who typically don't know anything about restaurants or food or guest service or education. And as a result, they tend to be very unambitious. They're very simple. I knew that in so-called emerging economies, one sector that takes off first is tourism, is hotels. And one of the biggest challenges hotels have continually, but certainly as they start, is finding human resources. They typically import in the early years people from all over the world because they can't find enough local people. It was a time in my life where I wanted to do something a bit different with really measurable impact. That led to me thinking about how could you take this large, uneducated, poverty generation of youth and match them with all this, obviously taking off tourism and the need created for human resources. And that's what led to the founding of Streets. It's our 16th year, over 500 youth, and 96% remain employed.
Awesome. What would you do with them? And at which age group do they join you?
The youth in the program are 17 to 24 years old.
Right.
It's a 14-month, very structured residential program based in Hoi An, Vietnam, in the center outside of Da Nang. And essentially a small school. And everyone that going through the program not only learns English, which is a big focus for us, as it is the language of tourism, also hospitality, and also culinary. They have the possibilities when they finish of either going front of house or back of house, cooking and chefing or serving.
Oh, lovely. And your yearly intake is how many students?
Our maximum class is 26. So we average about 24, 25 youth, we call them trainees, in each class. We always have run 2 classes concurrently, an advanced class and a beginning class. So it's a 14-month program, and every 7 months, one class graduates and another one starts.
And how do you fund this social enterprise to sustain it over 15 years?
I'm not an NGO, nonprofit background person. We funded it different ways. First, I will say, in terms of being a social enterprise, pre-pandemic, because of course the pandemic changed many things for us as it did for the rest of the world. Pre-pandemic, we funded approximately 80% of all of our operating expenses out of the revenue profits from the two eateries that we operate as our enterprises, which also serve as our site for apprentice site.
Right.
How did we get started? Our seed capital and to develop all this. I work with colleagues at NYU and at some of the culinary schools. As you well know, it does take a team to do anything.
Correct.
And I've had a great one. We have a great board, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I knew I wanted to do social enterprise. I didn't need any income myself, but I knew the ambitious nature of what I wanted to do required some sizable funds to start. I started with some of my own funds and some family contributions, and some friends and colleagues all said, well, if you're going to do it, okay, well, we're not talking about big dollars, but enough to get going. And I was very focused on the social enterprise model. Mm. And I was, as anyone does when they're fundraising, networking to see where there might be some deep pockets. This is 17, 18 years ago. It was a less well-known concept, but I was committed to it, and I spoke to anybody that would listen. I was fortunate enough to meet a man named Dec Ryan in the early days. Dec Ryan is part of the Ryan family from Ryanair in Ireland.
Right.
In addition to many other things, Declan is an extraordinarily generous and philanthropic person. He's had his own foundation. He's a very successful businessman with also a very big heart. And I was lucky enough to meet Declan. He had some connectivity to Vietnam already. And after not long, he invited me to Dublin, one of his homes. And he liked what I said. I know how to speak spreadsheet, and you need to. Mm-hmm. And Declan liked the idea. He felt I was credible because of the work I did. And we met a few times. We've become friends through the years. Also, a lot of appreciation to Declan, and a few other.
Actually, it's interesting. I heard that he also supported Miss Oang in the North with CSIP.
Yes.
And that's when I first heard about him.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That was after he was supporting us, I believe. He has supported others. He does have some connectivity to Vietnam. And Declan basically said his approach, I'll fund you to get you started. Tell me what you need. And that's it. Declan largely funded us for the first 2 years. And that was great. And then we started to do an annual fundraiser in New York City with our growing board of directors and my network. That's been a successful annual event that we've done almost every single year from the first year.
Right.
And it continued to grow from there.
Great.
There are many definitions. I think that many things that call themselves social enterprises are not. The term of social enterprise has been, like a lot of things, exploited in a not good way, in a way that it's used as a marketing tool.
Correct.
For something that might be a legitimate business, might have good practices. It doesn't necessarily be evil, but it's not a social enterprise. To circle back, it's an enterprise of some sort. So there's a product and there's a service and there's a sale but it has to be principally, not secondarily, I believe, principally with a mission that addresses one of any number of social, environmental, civic, global problems or challenges. I think at its core, if it doesn't do that, it could be many other good things, but it's not really a social enterprise. So social enterprise has to be an enterprise first and foremost, although conducted in a good, decent way, but that its chief mission is addressing any one of a number of very important issues that we know need addressing.
Very nice. So you're pointing to an enterprise to deliver a service or a product, and its core mission has to be to impact some change with a beneficiary group, either in social, environmental, or in any kind of social and
Yes, absolutely.
right.
That's right.
Yeah. There's also this confusion that people have not for profit,
Yes.
non-profit. You're an expert here, so I want to have this discussion.
I think that legitimate social enterprises can have different frames, different forms of government. It can be a for-profit organization. It can be a not-for-profit organization. It can be a hybrid of for-profit or not-for-profit. That's what Streets is.
Right.
And increasingly in some places, like Britain, for example, there are specific designations, we would call it incorporations or certifications of social enterprise.
Correct.
Right? So it can be any one of those different models. I don't think that one is necessarily better than the next. If the first layer that we spoke about of criteria of what it does, how it does it, and what its mission, if that's met, I think the model can be different models. The Streets is a hybrid. We're a very innovative hybrid model that I'm proud of because it incorporates both not-for-profit and for-profit. So in the US, Streets is a 501c3, which is the tax code for not-for-profit.
Oh, okay.
And you can think of that as perhaps the parent corporation or the parent.
Right.
In Vietnam, we operate with business licenses. We're a business.
Okay.
We have for our restaurant, because of the licensing categories here, we have restaurant food licenses and we have training, not education, training licenses. Right. And those are fully owned, if you will, by the not-for-profit parent. And so in Vietnam, we pay taxes, for example. And I think it's a good model. The question would be, well, why? Why that model? I speak about this frequently and openly. So there are advantages and disadvantages to both. Someone has a social enterprise certification, but it's very questionable. I don't know if there's much value in it. And
yes.
The not-for-profit status, and particularly in many Western countries, gives you a lot of room to operate, a latitude, and with good governance requirements, and avoiding having to pay taxes. So you don't have the burden of tax liability against the fund you.
Correct.
In many other places, like Vietnam, not-for-profit status or certification has some governance requirements, but typically has extraordinary and burdensome government oversight. As an entrepreneur, I find that very limiting in what you could do. Whereas a business license gives you much more freedom and ability to do within certain laws what you can do. And I can give you a very specific example if it would help. Because when we started, we first formed the 501c3 in the US. And then we were on the ground in Vietnam researching and figuring out what do we do. We knew that the training, the education we wanted to do to be really good and professional, and that required, in addition to resources, very good curriculum. And we informed that if you're not-for-profit in Vietnam, any curriculums used in any materials need government approval.
Right.
And so we developed first the beginning of our English language curriculum. Our kids finish in 14 months with English capabilities, sometimes equivalent to university graduates in Vietnam in their English speaking and comprehension. When we met the authorities, they said, oh, no. They wouldn't approve our curriculum. And they said, but you can use our curriculum. And they shared their English language curriculum. It was garbage. If you know Vietnam, English language instruction here still needs a lot of development. I remember meeting with the authorities in Da Nang. They said, no, if you're going to get a not-for-profit license here and do training and teach English, you must use the government-approved curriculum. And we decided at that point, the only way to do that was if we were a business, you can teach more or less whatever you want. You can say, I'm teaching my employees. So we realized that the liability of taxes which was much less of a liability than having to meet all the government regulations. So that hybrid model has given us the most flexibility to be as good as we possibly could be in the different environments that we work in.
That's a really innovative business model, like you said, especially also to have the not-for-profit in the US and have access to other donors through
Right.
that network as well.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
It's a
Well,
hybrid model that's worked very, very well.
right.
And
Yeah. Okay.
whenever I have the opportunity, I encourage others to consider those possibilities
Okay.
as well.
We are launching a 9-month next gen program. And
Wow.
one of the pieces that we want to embed in the program is philanthropy and impact, and how they can get started in that journey, whether they go out there and start their own social enterprise
Yes.
or it is to participate in an existing enterprise. The idea is to give an insight of the different models that people are using.
Please feel free to call upon me to talk about it. I've learned a thing or two over the few
Okay,
years.
great. That will be lovely. The next mindset, and that's crisis ready mindset. A crisis is a setback, a failure. Usually it's a life and death kind of a situation. Some of us freeze, some of us fight back, some of us can flee. What do you think was the key support structure and coping mechanism that allowed you to deal with crisis time and time again? And how did you develop that resilience?
Well, my answer is going to be resilience. Part of our challenges was to figure out our weaknesses, what we're not good at, and what our gifts are and what we're good at. We're talking about crisis and resilience. But I see things as a challenge that I want to figure out a way to succeed at it and
Right.
respond to it.
Mm,
And I can't tell you where that comes from exactly. I recognize that
mm,
in myself. And
mm,
I'm appreciative that I was blessed with that core. I think having a regular pat on the back is super important for all of us in how we develop our
yeah.
competencies. Early on, I had a mentor when I had to do a kind of an internship as part of my master's program. He said something to me, Neal, never forget, it's lonely at the top.
Mm,
And he's right, it is lonely at the top. Knowing that makes it less lonely. We're better prepared for it.
right.
And
It's a kind of an awareness.
yes, and I found out it comes from an old Chinese proverb, which is, it's cold at the top of the mountain. And so if you know it's cold at the top of the mountain, you could be prepared for it, and it won't be as cold as you're prepared for it. And I think that's a big part of resilience. In crisis situations, they call upon us to lead our way through them, right?
I also heard one more piece
Yes.
in how you described it. Yes, there is that knowing, but there's also that accepting, which sort of you go with the flow. It
Yes.
sort of reminds me also of how my grandmother and that
Ah,
generation of people related to doing everything as a sense of duty. But
yes.
I would never hear from her it was difficult or can't be done or I don't want to do it. It's in front of you, therefore it's your duty.
I completely agree.
Let's move on. Spirituality. Where are you in your spiritual
Uh,
journey and how do you define spirituality? Or what's your spiritual practice?
Spirituality is important. It's a very personal, individual thing.
Mm.
Everybody need a house as a practice.
Mm.
All the great religions have a house, whether it's a temple or a pagoda or a church
Mm.
or a synagogue. There's a place one can go to. That house can be any number of the institutional places. It can be a park, the ocean, the seaside.
Yeah.
Um, but one should know what your house or houses are and make sure you visit them. I'm not Catholic. I just I just came back from a few weeks in Europe and in Germany, visited some of the most beautiful. It was around the time that Luther was kind of fighting the Catholics, and sitting in some of those churches. It doesn't matter what book one might read, right, or what
Yeah.
philosophy. You can't help but feel the power, feel your presence. So I think we all need to have a practice, but also a practice with some physicality to it. It could be pickleball, it could be jogging, it could be running. For me, I'm an avid yoga practitioner.
Oh,
For many years, I have a master teacher in India that I work with. It's a very disciplined, challenging, difficult form of yoga that works
yeah,
for me,
correct.
and I'm devoted to it as
Yeah,
part of your spirituality. As
yeah.
that there needs to be some physicality to your practice.
Oh, that's lovely. You've brought a new dimension to this conversation. I love the analogy of having a house where you come to worship or to be present or to connect. And
Yes,
that physical aspect to the practice is also important because it's like a reminder. It's also the validation of the connection.
yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah, lovely. And do you think it's possible for us to live a simple life? And what's a simple life for you?
Yes, it's possible. It's quite difficult in the world that we live in. I don't want to be a hypocrite. I try to simplify my complicated life, my
Mm,
diverse, multi-resident, multi-country, multicultural life to be as simple as it can be wherever it can be. Because it's a big challenge uh,
mm,
for me and for everybody, but it's an important one.
yeah.
I think when we think about simple life, we need to realize the poison that's all around us
Mm,
with the screen and a little bit with AI.
yes.
There's really a poison amongst us,
Mm,
and we're all digesting it.
yeah.
And we need to be speaking about it more often, be saying more often, stop for ourselves, for our colleagues, for the people that work for us. For me now as a parent, this is a terribly challenging issue for children, their
Mm,
upbringing and their ability to think about a good life and a simple life. I think we must be more mindful and more in control and more direct of the poison that the screen, just to, metaphorically, um, how it's interfering.
it's really great that you highlighted it. People have been enamored by AI and what it provides in terms of productivity. But we also can see that if we outsource our thinking, then we have
Wow.
very little to navigate in life. That's a big worry to me as well, as I have a 30-year-old. And I wonder what will happen if everything is centered around AI.
You said it very, very well, outsourcing it. I sit on two university boards, and AI is a very, very big issue. Universities across the world, but particularly in the US, are going everywhere from considering AI the same as plagiarism and cheating, and you can be thrown out, to a mandatory first semester course in how to use AI. So that's
Correct.
the diversity of how we're thinking about AI. One would have to be foolish not to see some of the value in it, of course. But as a person who learned largely to think clearly because I learned to write, I am so troubled by, if we don't learn how to write, are we learning how to think? We recently were interviewing for a manager level, university educated position. We have a very good team, and they, of course, did a preliminary review of all the many, many CVs and then sent me the top 10 for me to have a look at. And I'm reading through the cover letters and the CVs. And I only had one glass of wine, so I was relatively sober. That's all I usually had. And all of a sudden, I'm thinking, wait a minute, I read that already. And then I kept reading, wait a minute, it's not the glass of wine.
Mm.
And I went back and looked and then actually reviewed 9 out of the 10 cover letters were almost exactly the same.
Wow.
And we rejected all of them. I'm not sure that was the right thing, but I just share with you what we did. And some of those people probably would, in other ways, be very suitable. These are people with university education, some years of experience. As a result of that, we just posted another position. We said all AI-generated cover letters and CVs will be rejected. So it's very troubling because when people are not learning how to express themselves and think clearly through.
What about thriving? What are the 3 words that describe thriving?
3 words. Oh my God. Can it be 6?
Yes, of course.
No. Contribution and impact. High value. I don't know an eloquent way to, or I don't know how to, and resist greed.
The circle of life, right? The gratitude for what we receive and what we give.
Yes.
Because if we don't keep that circle going on, there's no giving and no receiving.
Yes, you're correct.
Neal, I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for a very thought-provoking session.
Well, because you're thought-provoking, and I appreciate that a lot about you. And thank you. I hope that we have many more opportunities to discuss, and let's find a way to collaborate.
Yes.
More good people around the table is always better than less good people. And I would be delighted to sit around any table with you. This has been a great discussion, and I appreciate all that you've done a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Neal. Okay, lovely.
Okay.
See you soon in Ho Chi Minh City or in Hanoi if you are up there.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.